I'd like you to check out this image for a little bit. Okay, now we could chuckle or talk about or even debate the messaging of that meme, but here's the point. A month ago, give or take, people, maybe you, were complaining about having to go out to the store, the grocery store or another store, to get the thing that they forgot, or complaining about just having to go out in general. Now today, people, maybe those same people, maybe you, they're looking for any possible excuse to get out and go to the store and get that essential item. And we do this, they're doing this, because we want to be in control. We want to be able to do what we want to do. We want to have authority over our life and ourselves. We want to be able to take care of. We want to be able to serve ourselves. Now, James and John, who were two brothers, and their mom, they went to Jesus and they asked a favor. And the favor was that James and John, that they could sit on Jesus's right and his left in his kingdom. Two positions of power. But right before they did that, right before that happened, this happened in Matthew chapter 20, verses 17 through 19. Let me read it to you. Now Jesus was going up to Jerusalem. On the way, he took the 12 aside and said to them, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the teachers of the law. They will condemn him to death and will hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and flogged and crucified. On the third day, he will be raised to life." This is God's word. Now, in those 3 short verses, Jesus exercised his authority in the most selfless way. That is, he forgot himself and was using his authority to serve other people. But James and John, they missed it. They missed it completely because they were too focused on themselves. Instead of seeing what Jesus was doing for them, they were too focused on seeing what they could get from Jesus. Now, it's easy for us, super easy, for us to sit here and think, how could they do that? How could they? Like, Jesus just said he was going to get tortured and murdered and crucified, and that he was going to come back to life 3 days later, and all they're doing is thinking, what positions can we get from this Jesus guy? It's easy for us to sit here and think that, but we live every moment of our lives in the reality that Jesus has already done those things. He already was tortured. He was murdered. He did come back to life on Easter. It's true. It's a fact. It happened. And yet we still have the same self-focus that James and John did. Take, for example, our prayers. Take my prayers, for example. If you count them all up, probably the majority of them are going to be focused on me, asking things for me or for my family or for my friends, or asking something that's going to benefit me in some way. Or take our worry. And yeah, worry is inherently a self-focused activity. Maybe you're worried about these days coronavirus in general, or about your job, the one you lost, or maybe your future job, or what's going to happen, or maybe your savings, or about that stimulus check from the government. How's that going to work out? Or maybe you're worried about your future family, or home, or work, or your church, or your friends, or your mental health. Or maybe you're complaining about leaders, maybe in health or in government, and how they are currently exercising their authority. Maybe you're complaining because you literally think you could do it better, or the person that you like could definitely do it better, you think. And then if that person were exercising authority, it would work out better for you. We're self-focused in so many ways. And those things, they're not just wrong, because being self-focused is wrong because it goes against what God says, they're also just not helpful for us. Like, when has worrying ever been a helpful thing for you? Jesus said, who of you by worrying can add an hour to your life? Worrying does not help you. And whenever has complaining about the person in government that you don't like, or the group in government that you don't like, when has it ever been a positive thing, an encouraging thing? When has simply complaining about that person or that group, when has it ever accomplished any good? Forget all that and simply serve selflessly, because that's what your Savior Jesus did for you. Jesus told James and John and the 10 other disciples, he said, the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And that's what Jesus did, in spite of us, in spite of all my self-centeredness, in spite of our worry, in spite of our complaining, in spite of everything wrong with us. Jesus served us. He didn't simply show us how to serve. He didn't simply inspire us to serve. No, he served us. He served us by taking the infection of sin and guilt out of our hearts and letting it kill him instead, because he knew that was the only way to save us from it. Now, these numbers, by the time you hear me say this, they're probably going to be wrong and outdated and obsolete. But depending on what source you read or listen to, out of all the healthcare workers who are currently working in a hospital or clinic particularly affected by the coronavirus, out of all those workers, about 25% of them are contracting the virus themselves, and some of them are dying. A couple weeks ago, the governor of New York, he made the call. He called out to retired healthcare workers and he said, hey, come help us. We need you. We need you to support the healthcare workers who are currently working to and past the point of exhaustion. And tens of thousands of people who had been retired, they came out of retirement. And just this week, he called out to the whole nation. He said, hey, if your area is not in dire need of you right now, come and help us. We need you. And people are flooding in. They're volunteering to go to New York City, the current American epicenter of the virus, and they're risking their lives to serve those who need treatment. They deserve our thanks and our praise. But Jesus, he did even more. Because when he volunteered to come from heaven to earth, he wasn't just risking his life to serve those who needed treatment. No, he was doing even more. When he volunteered to leave heaven and come to earth, the epicenter of sin and guilt and death, he was doing more than risking his life. He was giving up his life. He knew for a fact what would happen. He knew that he would die, that he would be abandoned by his Father in order to be the ransom payment that would take away the sin of the entire world. He willingly, knowingly infected himself with the virus of our sin and our guilt, and he let it kill him instead, because he knew that was the only way to save us from the virus. May that health care provided and paid for completely by Jesus and his boundless love for you, may it fill you with peace and rest to the greatest degree. Amen.